You're listening to the Raising Family Podcast with your hosts, David Steele and Linda Hill. Brought to you by thefamilyproclamation.org.
Hello and welcome to the Raising Family Podcast. I'm your host, David Steele, along with co-host Linda Hill. And today we are blessed to have with us Cameron Maddox. And Cameron, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to get us started?
I'm Cam Maddox. Grew up in Salt Lake and Alpine. Currently live in Eagle Mountain with my wife and 4 little girls. Jordan and I, this will be 10 years this June that we've been married. Lola's our oldest. She just turned 5 this month. And we don't have any twins, and we've got 3 younger than her, all the way down to 18 months.
Wow, that's awesome.
We love them to death.
You're a lucky daddy. Girls take good care of their dads, just so you know.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that, especially after I'm paying the wedding expenses. So
I can talk to you about that.
And we wanted to move somewhere where we could have a little farm, and that's what we're trying to do out here on our little property. I currently work for eBay as a critical facility engineer, basically helping keep their server facility in Salt Lake up and going 24/7 hours a day, 365 days a year. So I learned a lot on my job. I haven't been there very long, but it's a lot of fun to learn about that. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, that's cool. So I think, today we're going to talk mainly about identity, about labels, and it's kind of coming from paragraph 2 of the Family Proclamation. So I'm just going to read that paragraph, and then we'll just dive right in after that, and look at some of your experiences with labels and identity, and learn some awesome stuff from you.
Yep.
So I'll go ahead and read that, and then we'll get cranking. It says, all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each is a beloved spirit, son or daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your name? Because that's one of the reasons we're having you on here.
Yeah. So my original last name, what I was born with, is Loser, spelled Loser.
Uh-huh.
Clearly, if you saw that written on a piece of paper, I would bet that 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to read that as loser. At least that was my experience all growing up. I'm not going to lie, I'm probably more sensitive than some of my other siblings, but that always was very hard for me and bothered me a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
I know, thinking back on it, my parents would always say, if it's not your last name, then we'll find something else to make fun of you for, or you know what, it's fine. You'll learn to deal with it, just like I did, right? Just like my dad did, or my mom did when she married him.
Right.
And so that's just kind of what we always did. There was no easy day in elementary, and I would say it even took up probably till middle school, probably even 9th grade, to where I really could deal with it and not care. But the first day of class every single year for as long back as I can remember, I think I probably learned how to do this maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade, but I knew that it was just a matter of time before the teacher went down and read your name. And some of the teachers in elementary had my older siblings, so they knew how to pronounce it. But if you ever got a substitute teacher, I felt like I always had to be on my toes because I didn't want to give any of the kids a chance to laugh at me. So I would literally listen as they read down the list in alphabetical order, by kids' last names. And the second that I thought they were going to start reading my name, I would instantly just yell here and try and cut them off, so they wouldn't say, or announce Cameron Loser here, right, when they're calling roll.
Wow.
So there were little tricks that you would try and learn to beat teachers to the punch like that, so you wouldn't give kids a chance to make fun of you. And then you go to recess and kids would still call you loser or whatever, and you'd had you had your sworn enemies in elementary, you know, that was their get at you if you won in basketball or kickball or whatever. At least I'm not a loser, you know, whatever it is. So, we just learned to kind of close it off and deal with it. I mean, even my best friends in high school would still call me loser, you know, a lot of the time. And to me, it just became second nature. And where it really kind of opened back up a wound is when I married Jordan. I mean, and she knew all along. We dated she'd known me for years, and then we dated seriously for over a year. She knew all along what she was getting into, and it wasn't really a problem for her. But when we had our first child, Lola, Jordan, we were living in Preston at the time, and Jordan entered her in a baby beauty pageant for Preston Days. Mm-hmm. And on the stage, when they were announcing the winners, they announced Lola loser. And I could instantly see on Jordan's face that she was just holding back tears, and she was looking right at me, just trying so hard not to cry in front of everybody. And when she got off the stage, I knew that I was going to be in trouble. And she said, she's like, we can't do this. She said, I still, you know, she struggles going to the grocery store and someone looks at your card or your license or whatever. And every time they just say, that's really your last name, right? Or there's got to be a different way to pronounce that than loser, because no one would have that last name. So I knew I was in trouble. And I mean, I always told her, you know, it could be worse, right? I was in the MTC, and I wish to this day I remember what the elder's last name was, but I was walking down the hallway with my companion going to the cafeteria to eat dinner, and two elders came by. And I mean, it makes me laugh now. I mean, I guess ultimately they thought mine was worse, but he said, hey, we're having an argument. He's like, whose last name's worse out of these two? They both had two pretty decent bad last names, and one of them was clearly worse than the other. And then my companion, without even thinking, was like, you should read my companion's other last name. And both read my plaque, and they were like, we're like, we asked the right elder whose last name was the worst today, didn't we? And then we all just laughed, right?
Oh my goodness.
So it was pretty funny. I mean, I still laugh about that to this day, because what are the chances? But I mean, there's certainly, like I say, there certainly is other names out there that I still think are worse. But all in all, Jordan and I just had so many deep talks about, you know, what would it take to change the last name, and how big of an issue is that really? And to me, it really boiled down to, well, what would my immediate family say if I'm going to change my last name? And what would my siblings say? And more importantly, what would my dad have said if my dad were alive? My dad passed away 2 months before I came home from my mission from Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
So
sorry to hear
that would probably, you know, have been a conversation to really have with my dad more than anything. And I think that anybody going through the same thought process in their head would say, well, you're carrying on your father's last name. So it would be a conversation to have with him. Well, I can't have that conversation. So I discussed everything with my siblings and my mom, and told them, said, well, you know what we're going to do? I said, we're seriously contemplating going back a couple generations to where they spell our last name with an H in it. So it was Lohser. And who knows why our ancestors decided to take the H out to make it seem like loser. But we said, we'll try that. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, a lot of my siblings were not in agreement, you know, throwing the same things out. Well, how can you change your family name? Like who does that? And my argument was, well, clearly our ancestors did it. They changed it, right? There's tons of different spellings of different last names along that ancestry line. So why can't I do it? I mean, times change. And that's what I always told them. I said, when Dad grew up, you know, I don't think that loser had the definition or is popular as a demeaning word in someone's daily vocabulary that it is in today's age.
Yeah.
So things change. And I said, I'm still trying to keep a family name. I'm not trying to change anything other than the spelling. So ultimately, like I say, I mean, some siblings that have not changed their name, were against it, but ultimately we decided to do it. And the reasoning was, if I could save Jordan, my wife, or my girls the heartache of having to go through that daily name calling that I did, or have to have that worry on the first day of class or with a substitute teacher, I will do that. I will pay whatever it is to save all of those days of crying and heartache coming home. Someone made fun of me. I will do that because I know what that feels like.
So part of this is your protective fatherly response. I mean, I see this dad of these 4 daughters, and there's something about this that is so tender to me. Like, you know what you went through, you know what you dealt with, and you have these 4 precious daughters, and you're wanting to protect them.
Yeah, exactly.
You're wanting to protect them. And I find that very sweet.
Well, yeah. And you said that you kind of, I mean, you've already kind of gotten over it. It's become second nature to you. You're saying, right, I can handle it if people call me loser. But you just don't want to have that, the years it took you to become okay with it. You don't want your daughters to have to go through that.
Right. And I mean, and it's funny. It's a joke within the family, right? I mean, my sister laughs and jokes about it to this day. I mean, partial truth, right? That she couldn't wait to get married to get rid of the last name. So, I mean, it's funny that, yeah, on one hand, everyone knows it's a bad last name. And at the end of the day, if my sister, even my mom said, if it was even an option to change when I got married, I would have explored that option. I would have loved to have that conversation with Dad, but it was never an option. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, right? And maybe my generation is different, but I just feel like I don't have to be stuck with that stigma. And if I can change that for my girls, then that's a responsibility on me. And I'm taking that upon myself to change it. So, and I know in talking to, I've got 3 sister-in-laws now. And I mean, we'll get into this, but my oldest sister-in-law, she would have loved to have this done, but I think that my brother at the time refused. And then maybe when they would have explored doing it, he was too established. He was already, in his career. It would be weird to do a name change. It would be weird to be in the bishopric or a bishop and change your last name. So, I mean, I don't know. And I don't know what the reasons are, but ultimately we were the first ones to make the jump. And I'm not going to say that, some people look down upon that, whether that was in my immediate family or really good friends of my parents. I know that some things had been said where people said that, that's not honoring your dad's name. But I mean, personally, I totally disagree. I mean, no one's been in my shoes. No one's been in my siblings' shoes. We all know what it was like. I mean, it's hard for me to even understand. I mean, I'm no psychologist, right? But I know that, if you're called a loser every day of your life by, the ones that you love, who knows really what that has done deep down or in my brain, right? And I feel like I've dealt with it just fine, but who's to say that hasn't done some sort of lifelong damage? I don't know, right? So to have people tell me, they totally disagree with me changing my name and that's not honoring my dad. I mean, that's very hurtful, but ultimately I can still honor my dad by not having his exact last name. That it's really based on my actions and who I am and how I raise my children that defines us, not, how my last name's spelled. So, ultimately, so we put the H in, we tried that for a couple years, and Jordan was still called loser a couple times by different people. One case was more severe than another. And she said, is there anything else we can do? So to really try and get rid of the whole situation, I went back another couple of generations on that same side of my dad's family line and found that, I mean, it's just another, weird circumstance, but Maddox is the last name and they spelt it a couple different ways. So I don't know what would cause the different spellings, but anyways, I took what I thought would be the most common spelling of Maddox, Maddox, and ultimately changed it a second time. So,
so you still stuck with your family history. I mean, your dad's
correct.
Side of the family. So
yeah,
you're still honoring your family name. And from what I understand, in, several generations past, often, like even when they say when people would come over on a boat, they would tell someone their name, and a lot of them were illiterate. And so whoever heard the name and wrote it down, that's the name, the spelling that would stick, in America as they came through Ellis Island or whatever. And so who knows what the evolution is. I was reading some stuff on the internet about just how many evolutions there have been in names. And also there have been some countries that sort of demand a name be spelled a certain way to describe a lineage,
Right. Yeah.
So you still are honoring your father by that. I mean, what other ways do you honor your father?
I don't know. I mean, I remember talking to some of my closest friends, and they said, "Oh, well, if you're going to do it, let's find a really, really cool last name." And then to me, that was never an option. I said, "Guys, no. I mean, I'm continuing on my dad's family lineage one way or another, and I'll find a name off that side of the family." So that was never an option for me to do anything other than that. So yeah, we did that. And since, you could argue one way or another, we haven't had any problems with someone calling us a loser, right? So it's taken that heartache away. And if they find something else to make fun of us for, so be it. But I feel like I'm at least saving that heartache, and Lola's going to go into kindergarten next year. So hopefully I'm not going to have a crying girl anytime she has a substitute teacher the first day of class.
Well, you'll still have crying girls, but maybe for different reasons. It just comes with the territory. So now tell me real quick I'm thinking about just, okay, when we talk about a name, think about everything that it's on, because you are talking as an adult or someone who's already in business. I'm just thinking you have your social security card you get at birth, and then you have your, license and your passport. And then if you own any property, car payments, credit cards. I mean, the list, I imagine that's a pretty complex. It is besides legal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Legally. Yeah. That just the headache of everything you have to change.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it was not an easy process. I mean, we looked into all of it and what it would take more from a legal standpoint with a court order. And that was probably the easiest part. They basically just said, a judge is clearly going to see why you want to change your last name. So yeah, you have to go through that process and wait a couple weeks, and then you get the stamp of approval. And then from there, it's pretty much straight over to the Social Security office. And then from there, driver's license, and like you say, banks, title companies, the works, any auto loans, cell phones, right? The list goes on and on and on. I think now we finally have that all figured out and it's all done. But we certainly tried to do that in as timely manner as possible, but it still took months. And then let alone we did that twice. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to, so you're not really, you're just basically rejecting the label that puts on you. When people want to call you loser. So you're still a loser. You're still a part of the family. You still believe in, the traditions that your family's created, and are you still close with your family? Is all of that still okay?
Yeah. Yep. It hasn't affected that at all. Like I say, there's countless things you and your sibling could disagree upon, and if this is one of them till the day we die, so be it. But yeah, it hasn't affected our relationships at all. And I guess to circle all the way back around, so I was the first one to do it, and I'm the fourth of 5 children. And when my youngest brother decided to get married, he and his wife decided that they would try and put the H in first and see how that works for them. And so they've actually gone through the legal name change process before his wife changed her legal last name. Just kind of did it all at once, and they're trying the H in it currently.
Well, that's kind of nice, because usually, and that's nice that they did that together, because a lot of women are the ones who have to go through all those hoops. Yeah. The men get to keep the name and the woman has to change everything. So that was a nice bonding experience for those two. That's great.
Yeah. And so, Jordan's really done it 3 times. And for example, like we were going back, that was a big headache with the USDA at the time when I was getting hired on, because you have to do a severe background check. And even same with eBay now is on any of those documents to say, have you ever gone by any other name, legal name? So I have to write every one of those down, anytime I do that till the day I die, because I've had all of these different last names, and same with Jordan for that matter. So, and Lola, I'm assuming she will have to do the same thing, because at one point she was born with an H in it. And so she'll have to put that in, and then Maddox.
Okay, so bringing back to identity, which is kind of what we're talking about, the kind of names that we take upon ourselves, they tend to stick sometimes whether we like them to or not. And I just find there's some really interesting parallels, because we kind of are living in this day and age. Everybody seems to want to put everybody in a box somehow and label something. You know, everybody's trying to find between identity politics and intersectionality and all these other buzzwords, everyone's trying to find some group or some way to label themselves or label someone else. I don't know if it's how we make sense of the universe or what. It seems that it's become a little bit more intense. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yep. I feel like everyone's on opposite ends of the spectrum, and everyone's trying to push a label onto someone else so that we know exactly where it is that you stand and whether that's true or not.
You know, and you talked earlier, kind of in the pre-interview, about a Facebook post that you posted that kind of goes along the lines with everything that you've been through, with kind of rejecting labels and choosing to continue the legacy of your family, even while changing, you know, the label on it. And it's, you know, there are so many labels in the world, and the labels that are put on people, they can really affect how you view the world and how the world views you. And, you know, the perspective of everything can change based on these labels. And I think it's cool in paragraph 2 of the Family Proclamation, it just talks about our identity being as sons and daughters of God. And that really is our main identity. And any other labels, you know, and names are a little bit different. And it's, you know, obviously with your name, there was some changes made so that people could be, you know, to avoid problems, as you have, you know, seen all growing up. But it's just interesting that these labels can sometimes pull us away from that main identity. And it's kind of cool in this Facebook post how you just kind of challenge a whole bunch of labels. I think you just kind of list a bunch of labels and what people suppose that they mean for the person carrying the label. And it's just really interesting to kind of reject some of those and kind of circle back to, you know, what's our true identity, and how does us taking on all these different labels kind of cloud that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense. Everyone can have their own identity. You don't have to allow someone to choose it for you. I mean, and this is something that I feel like everyone, you know, in at least my age and my generation, they're going through, and, you know, especially the kids that are younger than us, is the same thing. I mean, kids are doing their own research on the history of the country and where they want to be, you know, where they want their beliefs to lie, whether it's right or left or somewhere in the middle. And same thing with religion. They're struggling, you know, whether reading the history of the church or not, and saying, am I going to go to church? Do I even believe in God or not? They're trying to define where they are and where they want to be at, not saying I'm going to do exactly what my parents do and be labeled as my parents or not. I mean, I feel like it is a very unique time. And I know that the church recognizes that, and they're seeing that there's a lot of younger kids falling away from the church for one reason or another. But I know that is a real problem in the world right now. Kids are struggling to find their identity and where they really fall, and they don't want to have a label put on their head.
You know, maybe we can just have you, do you have that up? Could you read that post for us?
Yep. So I said, I never post, but have been struggling as of late. Give me your thoughts. I'm not right or left. I'm simply an American. I'm not pro-Trump nor pro-Biden. I am simply patriotic. I am troubled by the current thoughts and changing definitions of certain principles within our country and find myself stuck in the middle. When did being open-minded become a thing of the left? When did showing patriotism become a thing of the right? When did God-fearing choose to become Republican? When did LGBTQ decide to be Democratic? When did taking care of other countries become a priority of our own? When did aiding the rest of the world take precedence over our own citizens? When did immigrants take more importance than the veterans who fight for our country? When did having an opposing opinion become problematic? When did having an honest, intelligent conversation become career ending? When did learning about our country's history become intolerable? When did reciting our country's Pledge of Allegiance become unacceptable? When did flying our country's flag become a rite like sin? When did our country's national anthem, a hymn of unification, become a dividing line? When did free speech become too socially dangerous to hear? When did forcefully storming the Capitol of our country become thoughtful? When did listening to the President of the United States, whether you like him or not, and I put in parentheses, I do not, become acceptable? I fear we are less American with each day that passes. The ever-changing amendments that once defined our great country are now bending to the world's agenda. This is by definition un-American. Give me your thoughts. Who else is stuck in the middle? Why are we so divided? Is there no common ground? How do we heal our division?
Very thought-provoking questions for sure. What answers do you have to that? What are some of your answers to that? You posed the questions. Did you get any responses? Did you get any feedback?
I think if I had that answer, I could become the president of the United States. I don't know. That's why I put it out there. I think it obviously is more complex. No one, with all the money and all the jobs that are there in Washington, no one can figure that out. So I don't know what the answer is. There may not be an answer if we're not going to find, common middle ground.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about identity, and I do love that on the website, thefamilyproclamation.org, there's some amazing quotes and scriptures and research that has been done that I hope our listeners will take some time to think about identity. There was this one quote, though, by Elder Donald Hallstrom. He gave a talk called I Am a Child of God in General Conference in April of 2016. And he said, and this is, maybe part of the solution, I don't know. He said, is our heavenly parentage our first and most profound identity? Here on earth, we identify ourselves in many different ways, including our place of birth, our nationality, and our language. Some even identify themselves by their occupation or their hobby. These earthly identities are not wrong unless they supersede or interfere with our eternal identity, that of being a son or daughter of God. In today's world, no matter where we live and no matter what our circumstances are, it is essential that our preeminent identity is as a child of God. And, I have 5 children, and I do have a little granddaughter that just turned 2. And before she even turned 2, I was holding her, putting her to bed. I hope I don't get it. This makes me emotional. And one of my favorite songs that I always sang to my children, I started to sing, I'm a child of God, to her. And to hear this not even 2-year-old little girl filling in the words, I didn't realize she knew this song so well. Before she's even 2, could verbalize, I am a child of God. And I held this sweet little innocent girl, my sweet granddaughter. And I just remember thinking in this moment, how amazing is it that at this age, this tender little age, that she knows the words to this song and that she can sing, I am a child of God. And, I think we all know that, God tells us to be as not childish, but to be like a child, right? To be like a child. And I think that there's something in that innocence and that confidence that a little child has when they can sing this song. Because thinking about those questions that you posed, those are big questions. Who is it trying to put us in these groups? Who is labeling us? And who is trying to help us forget our true identity?
Right.
Well, thanks so much, Cam. I think we've learned a lot from talking to you today. It really does take courage and devotion to take control of your life, remove labels that hinder your progress, and continue staying true to your ultimate identity, which is a child of God. And thanks so much for showing us and our listeners that we don't have to let labels define us. The Lord has given us identity, and we can choose to align with that and continue moving forward. And I hope all of us can take that lesson into our lives and be more intentional about how we label and how we let others label us. Usually to end, we read the paragraph again, so everybody listening can kind of hear it again and connect it to the things we talked about. So I'll read that paragraph again. Okay, so it's all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each is a beloved spirit son or daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual, premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. So thanks again, Cam. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Raising Family Podcast. This episode was produced by Carol Rice. Our research coordinator is Angela Valentine. Audio was edited and mixed by John Wright. The Raising Family Podcast is brought to you by thefamilyproclamation.org.